Kindergarten, it's Mrs. Shivani again, back with our second listening and learning story of online school. So if you remember, yesterday we read about the 4 tradespeople who worked together to make different types of garments. Do you remember them? They were the dressmaker, the hatter, the tailor, and the cobbler. Today we're going to focus on the cobbler, and cobbler is just a fancy word for a shoemaker. So we are going to take a break from learning about a lot of facts, and we're going to learn a fiction story about a cobbler. In today's time, right now, the people who make shoes are not the same people who sell shoes. Our shoes are normally made in big factories, and then they are sold to smaller companies, and then those companies hire salespeople to sell shoes. So the people who make the shoes are not the same people that sell the shoes. But in colonial times, many tradespeople had to make products in their shops as well as sell the products. And running a shop and making sure customers bought your product was hard work. It was hard to do both at the same time. So today we are going to read about elves and shoemakers. And it's a story about this once very successful shoemaker. That means his company, his business was doing really, really well. A lot of people were buying his shoes. But he became poor. So listen carefully. Our goal today is to be able to name the characters and the setting of this story. And then at the end, I'm also going to give you a journal prompt that you're going to get to write about how the elves were kind and how the shoemakers were kind. So we have kind of 2 goals today. Our first is to listen to the characters and the setting, and our second is to listen out for how the characters in the story were each kind to each other. You ready to begin? So cozy up. Remember, you can sit mountain, mermaid, crisscross, legs out in front. And I also saw some pictures of students who were cozied up, like I suggested, with their hands on their face and laying on their bellies. So get into a cozy position in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's read. Once there was a shoemaker who had grown very poor over the course of several years. That means he didn't make much money. The shoemaker had been good at his trade. He made attractive, or good-looking, shoes that fit well and made his customers happy. But unfortunately, fashions had changed over time, and the shoemaker's shoes had gone out of style. People didn't want to buy them anymore. They preferred the shoes the shoemaker in the next town made. Oh, he looks very discouraged, doesn't he? I see that he has a sad look on his face. Oh, what's he doing here? The shoemaker looked around his shop, which was in front of his house. He had very few supplies left to make new shoes. What supplies or materials does he need to make a pair of shoes? It looks like he has some scissors, some buttons, some thread. What's this? Leather, I think? Didn't we read that yesterday? I think so. Since people had stopped buying his shoes, he wasn't making any money. Because he wasn't making any money, he wasn't able to buy any new supplies. He picked up the tiny bit of leather, it is leather, that he had left. He thought perhaps he would be able to squeak out one last pair of shoes before he closed his shop for good and moved to the poorhouse with his wife. He carefully cut out the pieces he needed and set them on the work table. But he was too tired to work, so he yawned and kissed his wife goodnight and went to bed. What do you think is going to happen next? Let's see if your prediction's correct. The next morning, he rubbed his eyes, kissed his wife good morning, and went directly to the shop to work on that last pair of shoes. When he entered his shop, he stopped short. He rubbed his eyes again. There, on his work table, where he'd left the pieces of shoe leather the night before, was a perfectly assembled pair of shoes. The shoemaker picked up a shoe. The stitching was neat and attractive. The shoe was more stylish and interesting than the shoemaker himself made. But where on earth had these shoes come from? Who made them? The shoemaker had no idea. The shoemaker asked his wife, but she also had no idea. Not knowing what else to do, the shoemaker picked up the shoes and placed them in his front window. Interesting. Let's keep reading. The story is getting good. Just then, a gentleman walked by. He stopped at the window and peered in. He quickly opened up the door and pointed to the new shoes. I simply must have these shoes. What will you take for them? The shoemaker shrugged and gave him his normal price. The man waved his arms excitedly. No. Those shoes are worth twice that much. He insisted that the shoemaker take double his normal price for the new shoes. The shoemaker accepted the money graciously. As soon as the man walked out of the shop, the shoemaker clicked his heels, kissed his wife, and ran out the door to go to the leather shop. With the money he had just been paid, he was able to buy enough leather for 2 new pairs of shoes. Later that day, the shoemaker cut out the pieces to make those 2 new pair of shoes. But he was tired, so he yawned, kissed his wife goodnight, and went to bed. What do you think? Oh, this is getting so good. In the morning, the shoemaker found 2 new pairs of shoes, just like the pair he had found before. The stitching on both pairs was just as neat and attractive as the stitching on the previous pair, and the style was just as interesting. He put the 2 new pairs in the front window and was pleased when 2 men walked in within minutes and offered double the normal price for the 2 pairs of shoes. The shoemaker again clicked his heels, kissed his wife, and ran to the leather shop. He bought enough leather to make 4 new pairs of shoes. Ooh, this is kind of like math. First, he had 1 pair of shoes. Then he had 2. Now he has enough to make 4. So each day it's doubling. Let's see what happens next. Again, he cut out the leather and went to bed. And in the morning, he found 4 new pairs of shoes. Again, the shoes sold quickly for double the shoemaker's normal price. And again, the shoemaker clicked his heels, kissed his wife, and ran to the leather shop to buy more leather. What do you think's going to happen next? Let's keep reading. This went on and on and on until the shoemaker had sold so many pairs of shoes that he became a very rich man. Was your prediction correct? I bet it was. One evening, just as he was about to kiss his wife goodnight, he suggested to her that they stay up and find out who was responsible for making all these shoes that had made them so rich. His wife thought that was a good idea indeed. So the 2 of them hid in a dark corner of the shop and struggled to stay awake. Ugh, they were getting really tired. I remember the title of this book is called The Elves and the Shoemaker. We've met the shoemaker. But I don't think we met any elves yet. I wonder if we're going to meet them next. Let's keep reading. At about midnight, they saw 2 little elves enter the shop. The elves were wearing old, worn-out clothes with holes in the elbows and knees. They went straight to the leather and began to work, stitching together shoe after shoe after shoe. When they were done, they lined the shoes up neatly into pairs and then quietly left the shop. The shoemaker and his wife were very surprised. Who would have imagined that these 2 little elves could make such stylish shoes? The shoemaker said. Yeah, said his wife, and yet they have no shoes of their own, nor do they have decent clothes. I would like to make them each a new set of clothes. It's the least we can do for all they have done for us. That is a nice idea," said the shoemaker. Keep listening for how they were both kind to each other. I remember that was our second goal. Let's see the next page. So the shoemaker's wife worked all day. She made 2 little shirts and 2 little pair of trousers. Those are pants. She made 2 little pairs of suspenders and 2 little pairs of socks and 2 little pairs of shoes. The little shoes looked exactly like little versions of the stylish shoes that the elves themselves made. That night, the shoemaker and his wife laid out the new set of clothes in the place where they usually set out the shoe leather. They hid in the corner to watch how their little elf friends would react when they saw their presents. How do you think the little elf friends are going to react? Think. I bet they're going to be really, really, really excited and really grateful. Here's our last page. Woohoo! At midnight, the 2 elves entered the shop. They saw their new clothes and looked thrilled to pieces. They quickly put everything on and then they danced together. "We are 2 fine little gentlemen now," said one elf. "Yes, we are," said the other. "We are so fine that we could never think of working as shoemakers ever again." They joined arms and skipped out of the shoemaker's shop. The shoemaker and his wife never saw the elves again. But by this time they had grown so rich that they never had to make shoes again, and they lived happily ever after. The end. That was a silly story. I really liked it. Okay, let's go back to our goals real quick before our video ends for the day. I remember we wanted to find out who the characters were in this book and what was the setting. So think, who were the characters in this story? Think. I bet you said that the characters were the shoemaker, his wife, and the little elves. You're right, those were the 3 main characters of the story. And what was the setting? Remember, the setting is where a story takes place. Think. Where was the setting? I bet you said that the setting was the shoemaker's shop. Yeah, that's where the whole story took place. And our second goal was to be able to describe how the elves were kind and how the shoemaker was kind. So what do you think? How are the elves kind? Well, they saw that the shoemaker was having trouble. He didn't have any money to buy new supplies. And so they made beautiful, beautiful shoes for the shoemaker to sell. That's how they were kind. And how was the shoemaker kind? Well, he stayed up at night and he tried to find who was making all those shoes. He discovered it was the elves who were making all of the shoes, and he noticed they didn't have shoes themselves and they didn't have nice clothes. So the shoemaker's wife made them these new fancy clothes and new fancy shoes. So they were both kind to each other. I love it. So today for your response, I would like you to draw who the characters were, what the setting was, how the elf was kind, and how the shoemaker's wife was kind. That is your response today. I will attach that to our Google Classroom so you can print it out, or you could just draw it on any piece of paper you have, or KA I know has journals that they could draw their response in. However you would like to respond to this story. It's so important that you have a takeaway though. So thank you so much for listening to this story. This was a really good one. On Monday, we will be back for listening and learning, and we're going to continue learning about different jobs. On Monday, we're going to learn about the house builders, and I know so many of you love architect and love to build, so I think you're really going to like this one. We're going to learn about bricklayers, masons, and carpenters on Monday, so that is going to be so much fun. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for listening. Bye!